Guyana is a country located in the northeastern corner of South America. Before colonization, the people of Guyana were spread out and belonged to mainly two people groups, the Arawaks and the Caribs. Guyana means land of water, so the land was very arable and the people groups practiced fishing along with hunting and crop rotation. This arable land was a very valued resource among the European powers and would later be a resource that was fought over and abused.
European colonialism caused major changes in the social makeup of Guyana. Socially, European colonialism created a lot of racial tension in Guyana. First of all, the Native Amerindians who lived there had their home invaded by the European colonists. Once the colonists settled in Guyana, they brought African slaves to work on their plantations. Once slavery was abolished, the colonists brought mostly Indian indentured laborers, but Chinese and Portuguese laborers were brought in as well. These laborers moved to different parts of the country once their labor contracts expired. Each ethnic group moved to a different part of the country, creating more and more division. There was quite a bit of animosity that formed as a result of all these ethnic groups sharing one country.
When the Dutch colonized the land, they took advantage of the fertile soil and began turning the country into a sugar exporting country. Plantations grew larger in size and number, and eventually Guyana was purely a plantation economy. When the British took control of the land in 1814, the sugar production was still the main focus, along with tobacco plantations, since Britain made all of their colonies focus on a narrow field or resource instead of a variety of things. When the British began the slave trade, slavery became the driving force behind the massive and growing sugar production.
European colonization shaped the political landscape of Guyana. In 1814, the British took control of the Dutch colonies of Essequibo, Demerara, and Berbice. In 1831, the British merged these three colonies into what would be called British Guiana. The British changed the structure of government often in Guyana, and the citizens did not elect their own leaders until 1957. And they asked Great Britain to resolve the issue. The British came up with a proportional representation system, which was intended to prevent one ethnic group from dominating. Through this whole process, two major political parties emerged in Guyana. The first was the People's Progressive Party, or the PPP. This party was rooted in its East Indian following and its communist ideals. The other major party was the People's National Congress, or the PNC. The PNC was based in its following from the Guyanese of African origin and its socialist ideals. These two parties have been in opposition for decades. European colonialism divided Guyana ethnically and as a result divided the country politically.
Guyana became an independent republic in 1966, but it struggled to succeed politically and economically on its own. The newly independent Guyana lacked a strong infrastructure, which the trenches and poorly made roads throughout the country show evidence of. The Booker-McConnell Sugar Company prevented Guyana from establishing economic independence. The company was British-owned and controlled one-third of Guyana's GDP. As a result, smaller local companies were unable to compete with this large British company, so the country was unable to further develop, and the unemployment rate remained high. In 1970, the government decided it needed to take action, so it asserted that the government would control 51% of the economy. Eventually, the government took complete control because foreign investors weren't interested in shared ownership. The government continued nationalizing the previously foreign-owned companies to boost its economy until world prices decreased, causing an economic downturn in Guyana in 1980. The government lacked the resources to support the struggling local companies, and Guyana began to shut itself off to foreign trade in an effort to improve the local economy. Eventually, they accumulated so much debt that they created an economic reform program, which is still in effect today.
The theme of hauntings exists both in the history of Guyana and in its overall status as a country today. A major theme within the horror/haunting novels is facing the unknown, like in Dracula, where the characters are unaware of what is psychologically haunting them. This is the case for both the Europeans and natives. The Europeans were exploring new territory and for the first time were exposed to new people, cultures, resources, animals, and more. The natives were also exposed to a whole other civilized society, which did not treat them well, surely haunting them forever. The slaves brought to the land through the Middle Passage, discussed in Feeding the Ghosts, were psychologically haunted both by the journey to the New World and the labor they suffered on it. Colonialism itself haunts Guyana both economically and politically today. As mentioned in Pauline Melville's The Migration of Ghosts, Guyana has a weak infrastructure, lacking nice roads, a reliable voltage system, and a strong government. Melville also touches on the heavy amount of crime and theft within the country, another indirect consequence of European colonialism. Finally, colonialism heavily factors in the social and political divisions within Guyana today. Ultimately, Guyana still struggles today because of the hauntings that fill its history.